In the Kichijoji city of Tokyo, Japan, there is a very unique cafe called Hachu Café, in other words, Reptile Cafe in Japanese. Like a normal cafe, you can order some drinks and desserts for a few dollars. But what is unique about this cafe is, do you notice? You will be surrounded by dozens of cages, and inside each cage there are lizards, snakes, turtles, iguanas, geckos, and so many reptiles. Not only you can watch these cool reptiles through the cages, you can also pick your favorite reptile and you can interact with them for like 30 minutes. The owner, Mr. Hirayama, started this place 4 years ago after he saw a turtle treated so badly in a pet shop. As a huge fan of reptiles, he wanted people to know how reptiles are cute and great as a pet and get rid of any negative prejudice about reptiles. So he opened Hachu Café so that people can directly observe and interact with reptiles. Now this cafe is always filled with visitors who fell in love with reptiles. However, reptiles are wild animals. Keeping them in a cage and handling them could potentially put so much mental and physical stress on them and might negatively influence their health. At the same time, the Salmonella bacteria, which is one of the main causes of the food poisoning, is secreted by reptiles, and it could also harm humans too. In this video, I'm going to introduce you the biology of the reptiles in Hachu Café and analyze their efforts to make the place as comfortable as possible for both of reptiles and humans, and discuss whether these efforts are effective enough or not. After watching this video, I'm sure that you will be a huge fan of Hachu Café and the reptiles there. First of all, let me introduce you the cool reptiles in the shop. All the pictures I'm gonna show you are actually taken in the shop. And let's start from squamates. So they have 29 species of squamates. From the suborder of Iguania, they are green basilisk, which is also known as Jesus Christ lizards that can run on the water. Martinique blue iguana, which I could not actually identify the species due to too little information in Japanese. Green iguana, which is usually green in the wild, but the one in the shop had a totally different orangish color. The central bearded dragon, which is very common reptile as a pet. Chinese water dragon with very beautiful green color. Field lizard, which is famous for its frill, but you really should not see the frill open because when they open it, they are usually very mad at you. And veiled chameleon with very unique skull structure. They also have 3 monitor lizards: Cummings water monitor, Queen's monitor, and blue spotted tree monitor. The color of this blue spotted tree monitor is actually very beautiful. Moving on to different families, they have red tegu, which literally looks like a dinosaur to me, blue-tongued skink, whose tongue was actually blue, which was so cool, bobtail, and red-eyed crocodile skink, which is my favorite. They are so cute. They also have many geckos. Madagascar giant day gecko, which is also my favorite, and Toki gecko have very distinct coloration. Peacock day geckos have black patterns at the arm joints, which look like eyes. Common leopard geckos are the most widespread geckos as a pet. Iranian fat-tailed geckos looked like the previous leopard geckos to me. I'm sorry, I'm not a specialist here and I couldn't tell the difference. African fat-tailed geckos. New Caledonian giant geckos are very big and have very cool paw pads. Mostly New Caledonian geckos are said to be trying to mimic moths. Crested geckos, gargoyle geckos, helmet head geckos, and northern velvet geckos. The skin of this velvet gecko was actually so smooth like velvet. Now let me move on to serpentes, which are snakes. Corn snakes are named because their scales look like corns. Western hognose snake has a nose like a hog, actually, you should check it out. And ball pythons, who are very popular as a pet. Not only squamates, but also they have testurines, which are turtles. Greek tortoise, whose name is Tabo, is the turtle, actually tortoise, but which the owner found in a pet shop and decided to open this Hachu Café. He is very special in the shop and he is actually in the shop logo. African spot tortoise is a very big tortoise, and this is a picture when he was taking a walk outside. The plastron of Chinese box turtle is like a hinge and they can completely close the carapace and plastron. Very cool. And finally, Chinese pond turtle is very small and very cute. So overall, there are 33 species and 62 individuals of reptiles. If you look at them in the evolutionary tree, there are 11 plus 2 families from squamates and 2 families from testudines. And in total, these 33 species are covering 15 families of reptiles. So there are diverse reptiles in Hachu Café. Not only they are diverse, but also they are very precious. If you compare the list of reptile species in Hachu Café with the red data list of ICUN, International Union for Conservation of Nature, while 20 species are listed as least concerned, 6 of them are listed as vulnerable, and 3 of them, the blue spotted tree monitor, Chinese box turtle, and Chinese pond turtle, are listed as endangered. International trade of many of the species at the cafe is illegal, but these individuals are the descendants of reptiles that were brought to Japan before their pet trade became illegal, and all the reptiles at the cafe were born and raised in Japan according to the staffs. Since keeping these species as a pet is not prohibited in Japan, what they are doing is completely legal. At the same time, not related to this cafe, but it is true that there are many illegal pet traders in Japan due to the lack of national laws and monitoring of the pet market of endangered species. This is a huge issue in Japan and more regulations are definitely needed as soon as possible, but this is a whole different topic, so I'm not gonna talk about it right now. Anyway, diverse and precious species means that you need to provide diverse and dedicated care on them, and different things could be stressful for different species. In this presentation, I will focus on 6 different factors: handling, temperature, humidity, space, food, and solar radiation. So first, let's look at handling related stress and how the cafe is trying to reduce those stress. So even though there are 33 species at Hachu Café, you cannot touch all of them. Actually, only 13 species are for handling. There are mainly 4 reasons why you cannot touch some species. The first reason is that they are carnivorous, such as red tegu and monitors. And if you touch them, they might bite you, and that will be a tragedy. The second reason is that they are scared of people are so sensitive, and they are not good at people. Chameleons and basilisks are the examples. Since handling could be a fatal stress for them, you cannot touch them in the cafe. The third reason is that some lizards, such as Madagascar giant day gecko and helmet head gecko, run away so fast. In order to avoid the cases where they just jump off from the table and get injured or escape from the cafe, those lizards are not for handling. Actually, there has been no reptile escape at Hachu Café because all the individuals for handling are very used to people, and even if you release them on the floor, they will basically stay there as normal because they are not afraid of humans. And the final reason is autotomy. Some lizards, such as tokay geckos and crested geckos, not only run away so fast, but they also escape by cutting their tail, which will never be regenerated in the case of crested geckos. By strictly managing which reptiles to touch, Hachu Café is minimizing the risk on both of reptiles and people. Not only that, they also have very strict rules for handling. Each visitor can only interact with one reptile, so you cannot touch, for example, one iguana and move on to a different lizard. Also, it is not strictly time managed, but each handling should be around 30 minutes. And whenever each reptile is done with handling, they have to get minimum of 1 hour interval before the next handling so that they can get enough break. And finally, each reptile is there for handling only twice a day. So when 2 people interacted with one reptile in total, now that reptile is down for that day. Each staff member keeps track of which reptile got offered for handling and when in brain so that they can make sure each reptile gets enough interval between handling and no one will be offered for handling more than twice a day. There's an old research about the handling stress on ball pythons and blue-tongued skinks, which are the 2 of the species Hachu Café owns, and the authors found that handling for a short period of time was actually not stressful on those 2 species, indicated by physiological and behavioral reaction. At the same time, the handling was only done for 10 minutes in the research, and there has been very little study about the stress from longer and repeated handling. We definitely need more research in that topic, especially because now reptiles are getting more and more widespread as a pet. I cannot be sure whether the handling at Hachu Café is stressful for reptiles or not. Still, since they are paying close attention on any indicator of stress from each reptile while handling service, and because they have the strict rules about the handling, I would say that they are doing a great job in minimizing the handling stress on reptiles. You might be wondering what if specific species is very popular and so many people want to interact with that species while only twice a day is allowed. Actually, some popular species like ball pythons, central bearded dragons, and leopard geckos, Hachu Café has so many of them so that visitors can enjoy interacting with popular species every day. Not only that, depending on the health conditions of each individual, especially right before and after skin shedding, when reptiles are very sensitive, the staff leader flexibly decides which individual to offer for handling that day. In that way, Hachu Café is paying careful attention to each of the 39 reptiles they have for handling. If I would ever propose any intervention to them, I would say it might be better to keep track of the handling service of each reptile on a whiteboard or something, rather than doing it in brain, because there are so many reptiles actually. When I asked them how they can do that, the staff leader told me that all of them are very big fan of reptiles and they love all the reptiles at the cafe, so they can never forget about when and which reptile is offered for handling. I think this love for reptiles makes Hachu Café a very comfortable place for reptiles. At the same time, handling also comes with the risk for humans. Most reptiles carry Salmonella bacteria and intermittently or continuously shed these bacteria, which could cause serious illness in people. For Salmonella to spread from reptiles to humans, bacteria must be ingested, like you touch reptiles and then touch your mouth or touch your food and eat it. In order to avoid these risks, there are very strict rules for humans in Hachu Café. First, you can only touch the reptiles after you finish your drink. And second, you need to wash your hands after handling the reptiles just in case you got Salmonella bacteria on your hands. And third, pregnant women and kids younger than 6 years old cannot touch the reptiles because they are more susceptible to the bacteria. Hachu Café offers feeding experience on tortoise for those people who cannot touch the reptiles so that they can enjoy interacting with reptiles too. Now going back to the 6 possible factors of stress, let me skip through these 4 factors because these are closely related to how Hachu Café chooses which reptiles to keep. So they choose species mainly based on whether the species can grow in the temperature and humidity of the cafe, whether they can feed and raise these species easily, and whether the space that can be offered at the cafe is sufficient or not. Since these species are selected to feel comfortable in the living conditions of Hachu Café, all cafe has to do is basically maintain the condition. For example, the air temperature of Hachu Café is constantly maintained at 25 degrees Celsius. If you look at the distribution of the reptile families of Hachu Café, they are mostly living in tropical or subtropical regions, and 25 degrees Celsius should be comfortable for them. Also, since most reptiles in cafe live in very humid regions in the wild, they are trying to maintain its humidity high by spraying water in the cage every day. However, they don't spray every single cage, of course. It depends on the reptile. For example, since central bearded dragon lives in the semi-arid area of Australia, they don't prefer humid environment, so they don't spray the cage of the bearded dragons. For those who are living close to aquatic environments in the wild, cafe provides a small pool so that they can enjoy bathing. In terms of food, depending on whether the reptile is carnivorous, herbivorous, or omnivorous, they have many different options. For example, for iguanas and tortoises who are herbivorous, cafe feeds them with leaf vegetables. For fruit-eating geckos like crested geckos and day geckos, the staff feed them with fruit jelly. For insect eaters, which are most of the small lizards other than the fruit-eating guys, the staffs feed them with crickets and cockroaches. You might be wondering, are these insects dead or alive? Yes, they are alive. They actually raise and breed crickets and cockroaches in a very big cage. Do you want to see cockroaches moving? Of course. If you hate insects, please close your eyes for 10 seconds. I'm playing this video because of the guy who showed me around the cafe and told me everything about the ecology of the reptiles. He's a huge fan of cockroaches and he told me that he actually has 50,000 cockroaches as a pet at his home. I was like, wow. So now you can open your eyes. Cockroaches are gone. Since they believe that feeding reptiles with live insects is very important for their health, they are raising and breeding those insects. For bigger carnivores, they feed mice and sometimes baby chickens. Are they alive? In this case, Hachu Café just buys dead and frozen mice and chicks. As I showed, by having diverse food options depending on the reptile, they are trying to maximize the well-being of the reptiles in the cafe. In terms of space, this is actually a very difficult issue because, compared to the wild, no cage could be an equivalent. While there is a common misunderstanding that many reptiles feel safer in a small environment and they naturally don't need space, many studies have shown that they are highly active and travel either within local ranges of several hundreds of square meters or indefinite ranges measured in hundreds of thousands of kilometers. So I can never talk about what is the enough size of the cage because no cage is as infinitely big as wild. Still, in Hachu Café, I would say that most species looked okay with what they have spatially. They have a very large cage compared to their body size and got some branches to bask on. For big reptiles like iguanas and tortoises, non-carnivorous guys are released in the shop most of the time and just chilling. For carnivorous lizards like tegu and monitors, since they might bite visitors, they are released in the morning and at night when the cafe is closed. One thing I noticed is the very small space for snakes. Because of their very long body size, I totally understand that it is hard to get a cage whose size is as long as their body. But still, some studies say that snakes need to adopt a straight line posture to relieve intestinal discomfort. So cages shorter than their body length is actually not ideal. But by letting snakes move and elongate their body freely outside the cage during the handling time every day, Hachu Café is trying to compensate for the space limit of the cage. In terms of space, I would say that more space is ideal for each reptile, especially for snakes, but they are doing their best with their space limit, which I totally appreciate. Finally, let me talk about the solar radiation. For diurnal species, solar radiation plays an important role for their health. In the wild, they spend a long time basking under the sunlight, and there are two reasons for that. For ectotherms who cannot internally produce energy to heat their body up, they need sunlight to maintain their body temperature high. Not only that, solar radiation provides them the UV lights, which will allow them to produce vitamin D3, which will then facilitate the absorption and metabolism of calcium. In Hachu Café, in order to satisfy these two requirements of solar radiation, they have two different types of lights. In this picture, the left light is the normal fluorescent lamp to create localized basking spot. If you look around the shop, you can see so many reptiles basking under these fluorescent lamps. Going back to the original picture, the light on the right is the UV light, providing UV to wider area of the cage. However, since nothing is better than the actual sunlight, on the sunny days, the staff members take iguanas or turtles out for a walk or just let them bask outside so that they can enjoy the actual sunlight and stay healthy. It is actually so cool to take a walk with a reptile. I wish I could do that. So that was a review of 6 different stress-related factors for reptiles and how Hachu Café is trying to manage this stress. Even though there's some issues related to how they keep track of handling time of the reptiles or the limitation of the space, still, overall, I would say that they are doing a great job in minimizing the stress on reptiles. Above all, what I really appreciate is that all the staff members really love the reptiles there. I could easily tell their love from the way they told me about their reptiles, from the pictures they showed me, and from the very delicate way they took care of the reptiles. They say that their most important policy is animal first. Because of their huge love for reptiles, they can always think with the mindset of animal first. Finally, they told me about their philosophy. If you look around the shop, you don't see any name tag or explanation of the reptiles. The reason why is because they don't want to make their reptiles just a display. For them, reptiles are their family. by the staff members standing between the reptiles and the visitors, explaining about each individual reptile with a huge lab. The visitors can learn about reptiles more, interact with them with love. In the world, there's something which you can only learn from directly interacting with it. If you ever have a chance to come to Tokyo, please visit Hachu Café in Kichijoji City and feel their love for reptiles. Reptile family is waiting for your visit.